I've been recording, producing, mixing music almost every single day of my entire life, and I've done pretty well because I know it sounds good and people trust my opinion. And I've been fortunate to be able to work with a lot of great artists over the years. There's always a lot of push and pull over all aspects such as lyrics, arrangement, tempo, style, but the biggest arguments have been over sound. And that's always seemed funny to me because shouldn't we all be in agreement? I mean, aren't we all hearing the same thing? I mean, yes, there's taste, opinion, and genres to take into account, but there have been other things that have kind of baffled me about how people are hearing things that go beyond taste and opinion. Is there something else going on? For instance, I worked with the singer Ricky Gunn, who is one of the best country singers I've ever worked with. But he had a hard time singing with headphones on when we were recording because he thought his voice sounded weird. It didn't, but let me show you this. This is what he sounded like and how I ultimately made him sound on the records.
Here in this small town, they all know my name.
But while we were recording, I'd make him sound like this in his headphones.
They don't forget what you do or what you say, but that was yesterday.
Which to him sounded normal, but after that, we'd get great takes. I worked with this other singer who had a beautiful voice, but would sing everything across the board exactly 30 cents flat. And for those of you who don't know what that sounds like, I made a little demonstration here since I don't have any of the original recordings. This is just me singing one note with the guitar. So here's what a note in tune with a guitar would sound like. Here's what 30 cents flat sounds like. And if you really want to see it, here's the in-tune note, here's the out-of-tune note, here's what they sound like together. Can't even listen to that. As you can see, it is a significant difference, but here's the thing. He could tune his guitar perfectly by ear along with the rest of the band, but yet he could not hear the pitch discrepancies between his voice and his guitar. I've worked with great drummers who can't carry a tune and great singers who can't tap their foot or clap their hands in beat with the song they're working on, yet they somehow nail their parts. But it was my wife, Kit, who really got me thinking about some of this stuff. She not only manages and schedules all my work and is a regular part of my live stream, but she also has some of the best insight into songs I'm working on, often better than the artist whose song it is. And she always picks the best song out of a group of demos that an artist sends me to listen to. Yet she doesn't play an instrument, and she's what a lot of people would call tone deaf, meaning if she's singing along with a song, she's not going to come anywhere close to singing the proper melody. And if I play her two notes on a guitar, she cannot sing those notes back to me. I always figured it was some sort of training thing, but it never occurred to me that maybe she's hearing something completely different than I'm hearing until I read this book, Musicophilia by Oliver Sacks, a physician and professor of neurology and psychiatry. In the book, he talks about a condition called congenital amusia, which affects about 4% of the population, and it usually affects their ability to recognize melodies and pitch differences. For instance, they might not be able to tell if one note is higher or lower than another note. Or if you've got two notes that are being played an octave apart, it actually sounds like this to them. But yet, people with this condition still enjoy music. There's another condition called dystimbria. People with this condition have a hard time processing timbre or tone, which means for the rest of us, we can hear different instruments playing the same note, but be able to distinguish between the different instruments because of their timbre, like this. For people with this condition, this becomes distorted and jumbled up. Some of Sacks' patients who have this condition describe hearing music sounding like pots and pans being thrown around a kitchen, the sound of screeching tires, or the sound of a horse carriage passing over a cobblestone street. There's also musical anhedonia, which affects about 3 to 5% of the population and is characterized by their inability to derive pleasure from music. They can hear it, they can recognize it, they can understand it, but they simply fail to enjoy music. Now, of course, he's talking about clearly identifiable conditions, but what if it's not as simple as either having the condition or not having the condition? Maybe it's more like how we look at autism, which we see as being on a spectrum. Maybe you only hear things a little bit out of tune, or maybe timbre and tone is only slightly distorted and mixed up. And all that got me thinking about other ways that we might be hearing things differently. Everyone's ears are shaped just a little differently, and that can affect how sound waves are directed into the ear canal. And any variations in the ear canal shape can slightly alter how different frequencies are amplified. Also, our left and right ears don't hear things the same way. The right ear responds more to speech, while the left ear responds more to music. Yet sounds from the right ear are sent over to the left side of the brain for processing, and sounds from the left ear are sent over to the right side of the brain for processing. Since one side of our brain is focused more on logic, while the other side is focused more on emotion, that means that the right ear, the speech ear, is tuned more to logic, while the left ear, the music ear, is tuned more to emotion. And that brings us to the brain, where most of the heavy lifting of hearing is actually done, but it's not as simple as you might think. The temporal lobe is the part of the brain that processes what you hear. The left hemisphere focuses on interpreting words and language, while the right side is more centered on music and sounds. While music and plain speaking are primarily processed in the temporal lobe, music enacts the right brain much more than speaking does. The auditory cortex is part of the temporal lobe and is responsible for recognizing pitch, tone, melody, and harmony. The prefrontal cortex, which is part of the frontal lobe, also has some role in processing music and to see if what it's processing makes sense in terms of pitch and tone. The cerebellum is responsible for balance and coordination. It works with the physical response to the rhythm of a song and helps musicians interpret that rhythm and stay in time with each other. Wernicke's area is involved in forming musical imagery and understanding lyrics in music. The occipital lobe processes visual information such as shapes, colors, and depth, and is not usually associated with sound. But some studies suggest that musicians might visualize a score when listening to music, and singers visualize themselves performing. Both musicians and singers can visualize rehearsing music and fixing mistakes in their head, which I actually do. The nucleus accumbens is activated when somebody listens to music they like, and is like a drug because it releases dopamine. The amygdala, which is a paired structure, also processes and triggers emotions. However, it can trigger both positive and negative emotions. This is what makes you cry when you hear a sad song. The hippocampus sits deep in the temporal lobe and is another paired structure, having one on the left and the right. It stores memories, particularly emotional memories. Music can activate the hippocampus in ways other stimuli doesn't because it can activate memories of music with emotional connections. The putamen, which I believe is another paired structure, plays a role in processing rhythm and is activated in the presence of a beat structure. It is believed that the putamen scans musical rhythms in search of a beat. It picks out regularity buried in cacophony and helps generate and maintain a model of an existing beat called beat continuation. All of this is helping answer questions for me that I've had about how I hear things. For instance, a lot of music professionals I know say that they can't listen to music casually because they're constantly analyzing it and dissecting the mix. But me, I actually have to stop and remind myself to analyze something because I'm, strongly emotionally affected by songs. I will listen to the same song over and over, and I'll get the same feeling every time. I'll cry every time. Also, I get my hearing tested once a year, sometimes twice a year, and I've got really good hearing, and it's almost identical on both sides. Yet, when I'm mixing, I always think that the left side sounds different than the right. Like there's like these major differences, which is why often when I'm mixing, I'll turn around backwards like that to the speakers, or sometimes I place speakers behind me and mix with music behind me so I can switch back and forth. And I reverse the left and right when I do that. And now I think I know I've got a better idea why that might be happening. And there's also this thing about being in a public place, like a restaurant. I could be sitting there and I'll hear a truck go by on the road outside and it'll seem like it's like a bass part. I'll hear the low frequency and then there'll be a kid over there wailing and I'm like, oh, that's the lead guitar part. And then back in the kitchen, there's something going on back there that's like a synth. Oh, that's the synthesizer, that's the string. And my mind starts hearing this as music, yet I can't hear a word of anything that's being said to me by the people around me. And it's not because I can't hear them. It's just the way my brain works. I can't even explain it, but it drives everybody crazy around me because I'm usually not listening to anybody. But I think the thing that I'm getting here is that when you consider all the possible variations of all the different hearing conditions and all the different ways our brains work, all the connections, all of our unique individual brains, it makes you realize we are definitely not hearing the same thing. We're not hearing the same thing at all. Yet, go to a concert, and there's all these people there. There's people listening to this music. Some of them might not even be hearing the same notes. Some of them aren't hearing the same tone. A lot of people aren't getting the same impact of it. They're not getting the same emotion. But yet, we're all there together, and we're all affected by this thing. And music is this way of bringing us together and impacting us. It's such a powerful thing that it transcends all these things that are different about how we hear music. It still cuts through that. It still cuts through how we hear it differently. It's like magic. I mean, isn't that amazing? Well, I don't know what else to say about the whole thing. It's just that I learned a lot making this video, and I hope you learned something too and got something from it. So thanks so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and be unique.